Today is October 1st, 2014. My name is Edna Sussman. I'm a reference librarian here at the Half Hollow Hills Community Library in Dix Hills, New York. We are interviewing Salvatore P. Saladino, a World War II veteran, as part of our Veterans Testimonial Project and in collaboration with the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. Thank you so much, Sal, for being here today and for participating in our project.
My pleasure.
Sal, where and when were you born?
I was born in 1924, November. I was born downtown Brooklyn. They call the area the Heights. My dad had all his businesses. He was a hairdresser and a barber, and he had all his businesses in that area. So therefore, that's where we lived. I was born on State Street, and my mom took me as a boy along the promenade, and I remember that very clearly. I don't remember yesterday, but I remember things in the past.
That's good. And what were your parents' names?
My mother's name was, let's see, well, they called her Nellie, but that was not really her real name. That was a sort of a nickname. And I can't think of what now at the moment. I got a blank on her name. But my dad was Joseph. Now, they both were Italian immigrants, came here from Europe. My mom was only 2. She never went back. My dad was 14, and he was educated in Italy. He came here. He went to night school. He had a large family, and he was really the breadwinner, pretty much. So he couldn't continue his schooling here, but he did read an awful lot of books.
So your mom was a
and he became very fluent in his speech. He had no accent.
Wow.
He spoke very well. My mom was very basic. She was a housewife, primarily, but she was a seamstress. She had become a seamstress, and so she did some work at home to help the family. But we moved considerably throughout the borough until eventually we ended up in Richmond Hill, Queens. My dad bought a large home, very old Queen Anne, big house, near the park. It was very nice. It was very graceful, quiet. All my children were born there.
How many children?
4 children. 4. They loved the neighborhood. They loved their home. They all went to parochial schools, and then eventually to high schools. And we stayed there 34 good years. Mom and Dad passed away. We didn't need an 11-room house. My children, some were married at that point. And we moved, like everyone else, east. We came to Wantor. Bought a nice little ranch in Wantor. And we stayed there about 15 years, maybe 15 years, I think. And at that point, the home became a little bit too much for me. I couldn't do the gardening. I couldn't do a number of things. I had my hip replaced, So I wanted to downsize. My wife refused to. She loved to have the children over every other week, all of them together, so that one wouldn't be offended. And she just loved doing that and all the cooking and so, like a typical Italian woman, But I kept telling her, Ann, we have to downsize. I can't manage the house. So eventually we ended up in the Greens.
Oh, here in Melville.
Melville, right. Now, we didn't, I don't know if you've been in the Greens. It's a lovely community. We didn't buy a villa. We don't build a villa. We don't want a townhouse because we got rid of the house. Okay? We wanted a nice little apartment, and that's what we got. Nice. However, once we moved in, we said, this is kind of tight. We had a home. We always had a home. But something I told my wife, I said, when you stop and think about it, this is just all we need.
That's right.
We don't need more than that. And I said, and when I pass on someday, and I'll probably go before you, I said, you don't need more than this. You got a kitchen, living room, dining room, 2 bathrooms, one with a shower, a den, a big bedroom. What more do we need at this stage in our life? And I always tell people, we have choices today. Years ago, we probably didn't do this, you know. So we're very happy there.
I'm
We're
glad
there
to do
10
that.
years
Nice.
now. 10 years. And we love it.
Now, do you have siblings?
Pardon me?
Do you have siblings, brothers, sisters?
I only had one sister, but she passed on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I had a small family. My wife had a large family.
Was she in the military, your sister?
No.
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 And what did you do before you entered the service?
I studied. I had just finished high school, and was going from high school. I went to a Stewart Technical Institute in the city. It's a school for drafting and engineering, and I studied drafting, aeronautical drafting for that matter. When I graduated from that course, I was inducted. Okay, I had been given a deferment because I had signed up at 18, and because I was still in school, I was allowed to finish my course.
So at that point, when you were done, you were drafted?
So when I was done with school, yes, I went into service immediately, yeah.
Uh-huh. And which branch of the military was it?
Well, they put me in the infantry. And we...
Army infantry?
Army infantry. And I was really a infantryman. That's what I was trained as. I was trained down in Alabama.
That was the training camp?
That was the Army. And I trained there. And from there, we were supposed to go to Europe to replace some of the soldiers who had been wounded or passed away, and we were going to take their place.
You remember
so
what?
We were replacement infantrymen, really.
What year did you leave for Europe?
1943. Yeah, August, I think it was. So I wasn't so happy about that assignment, but while I was in training, I studied to be a scout, infantry scout.
What does that involve?
That involves when you're in a combat area, you go and you, on your own, and you search for the enemy, and you bring back information where he's located, the size of the force, and you bring all this. In other words, it's like a scout, even in civilian life, you know, what a scout does. And I said to myself, that's kind of dangerous. I have to stick my neck out there, get shot. I said, I don't particularly like this too well. But anyway, aside from that, I didn't complain.
Did you go alone, or were you with a team, or?
Sometimes we usually have a team, 2 or 3 people.
Just 2 or 3 people?
That's all. And you go scouring around looking for the enemy's position, the size of it, where they're located, stuff like that. And you bring back that intelligence, that information. So that's how I was.
That's what you were trained for.
Now, when we finished training, we brought up north, and we were supposed to ship out to go to Europe. It was at a time when the invasion had just taken place, June 6th. And that meant that all of these troop ships were occupied over in Europe, bringing troops over, okay, for the invasion. They had no ships available for us. Now, in the Army, you don't sit around and do nothing, so they took us, my group, shipped us down to Mississippi, Camp Shelby, and we stayed there in the hot summer for another 3 months. Wow. And of course, you don't sit around, they train you. They keep training you, you know. Eventually, we got up north. We were ready to go to Europe. We get to Europe. We landed in Ireland. Then we got boarded a train, came down into England. Down into England, there's a Army tent camp in this one area. And we were there only for a few days, supposedly. And we were supposed to go over to Europe. Okay? Now, this was just prior to the, I think it was, what was that I'll get to it later. Anyway, so they, before they sent us over, now they give you one last physical to be sure you're fit for combat, okay? In this interview, very interesting, I had a good friend that trained with me, and he had just come out of the interview, and he says, Sal, you have very bad feet. I know you do. He says, why don't you tell them about it? It may help you. You might get reassigned or something. You know, he said, what do you got to lose? Well, I never even thought about it at the time. But okay, so I went up there, and there's this colonel, he's a doctor, and he examines everybody to be sure that they don't have serious problems, and then he okays you for combat duty. Well, he told me, I stood in front of his desk, he says, take your shoes off. Says, okay, took my shoes off, and I'm standing there barefooted, and suddenly some officer walks into the room, and he goes over to the doctor, the colonel, and he starts speaking to him. And I'm still standing there on my bare feet, waiting for something to happen. So about 10 minutes later, they were through speaking. He looks at me and he says, Saladino, he says, go, you can go. I said, this is stupid. Didn't even look at my feet, you know? But he tells me to go. Well, the irony of it is the following day, there was a notice put on the board, bulletin board, with a list of names, and mine was on it. Limited assignment. Okay. Well, I'm not going to argue with that, you know, because, you know, we were going to be sent over right during the time of the Battle of the Bulge. I don't know if you're familiar with that. That was a very serious event. Yeah, Battle of the Bulge.
I knew that.
And where the Americans were trapped and the Germans were, you know. So the point is I didn't go. You know, so I was reassigned to remain as part of the service groups in England. Mm-hmm. And I was attached to a convalescence center for the Army. That meant that the troops that came over, that were wounded, that needed care, rehabilitating, were put in this hospital. And I was assigned to work in that hospital. Now, since I was just an infantryman, I knew how to use a rifle, yeah, you know. Mm-hmm. I mean, what am I doing in a medical hospital? So they assigned me in the motor pool. Okay.
What does that do?
The motor pool meant that I drove vehicles, see, for the Army. And I drove all kinds of vehicles, the big ones, the small ones. And one of my duties was to follow up when there was a raid from Europe,
a what?
Airplane raid from Europe that came back to England, and very often they had a lot of wounded on board. And my job was to take an ambulance and go there and transport these people back to the hospital, back and forth, and so forth. But I did a number of different things in the service because I was really essentially trained only as an infantryman. So they put me in wherever they could. I would drive big officers to London on conferences back. I did a lot of things. In fact, I saw so much of England that I loved the place so much that I took a trip after the war with my wife, and we traveled to all the places where I had been stationed in England. But and I know all the pubs in England, by the way. You know, the pubs like little bars.
Now, when you started to serve, you were 19, 20 years old when you started.
I was 19.
19. So you weren't married yet?
No, I didn't even meet my wife.
Okay.
I met her after the service. In fact, did I go to school? No, I had no money. I'd just come out of school, you know. So I had to establish myself, get a job. I had to decide really what I wanted to do as a career.
Right. Well, we'll get to that. Let's stay still. You're stationed abroad now. So you must have seen a lot of injuries and casualties and things.
And every time I went to London, they would be sending rockets from Germany, you know. This was constant. Those long B-1, B-2 rockets. And they did a lot of damage. They would destroy a whole block, one rocket.
How did you feel when you saw all that?
Well, you know, what can you do? You know, you have to deal with it. You have to deal with it. And it wasn't until the American Air Force started to bomb Germany that the rockets were diminishing. There weren't that many coming anymore.
But how did you keep safe while they were coming in? Where were you?
Wherever I was at the time, you know, you didn't know they were going to come because all you heard the last few seconds was a whistling noise. And then the whistling would stop. And that bomb would then go this way. And it would drop. It was really to demoralize the public. They didn't have any specific target. They just let them lob into London. You know, they knew there was a big cosmopolitan town, and they could do a lot of damage. They could do a lot of moral damage too. You know, people. But the English were tough, and the women were as tough as the men. They were very resilient. They had a great leader in Winston Churchill, great leader, and so they got through it. So I spent most of my time traveling throughout England, driving around, motor pool, and to the airports, to the hospital, wherever they put me. Mm-hmm. And I stayed there until the war had ended. Okay?
So
now, as I said, when the Battle of the Bulge occurred, they tried to get help from the soldiers that were in England, like me, for instance, some others, that can at least handle a rifle and go over and relieve those soldiers. So they scanned the whole country of England. They took men here, men there, but they didn't touch me for some reason. You know, so okay, I wasn't complaining about that. So I never really got to France. Never got to France. Now, when I spent all my time in England, I did a lot of different things for the government. I'm part of the service group. The war ended, and we were sent back home. Now, they had a point system at that time where you needed X amount of points to get a discharge from the service. Even though the war ended, they weren't going to let you go right away. Oh. So I didn't have enough points. So they sent me to where? To Missouri. So
to do what?
All over.
Why? What was in?
Until I had enough points to get discharged, I didn't qualify, so I had to stay in the service. So what were they going to do with me? So they sent me to a camp in Missouri, Joplin, Missouri, a little dinky town, Main Street. And I stayed there for about 5 or 6 months.
Oh, wow.
At that point, then I was put in the supply department.
Was that in 45? 45?
No, I issued supply uniforms, stuff like that.
1945, was it? Or?
That was yes. Yes. That was 1945. And as I said, you know, they didn't know what to do with me, so they made me supply sergeant. So now I'm in supply. I was in so many things. Mm-hmm. But that was okay.
How did you stay in touch with family and friends while you were over there in England?
They allowed us to send letters.
Uh-huh.
Letters, yeah. Letters. And I have, in fact, a little telegram that I sent my mom when I went to Europe to let her know that I arrived safely.
Oh, wow. Nice. Very nice that you kept it.
It's getting kind of old, yeah. My mom swears that it was her prayers and her novenas, day and night, praying for me, that brought me back home safe. And maybe that's why I didn't have to go that time, even though the doctor never looked at me. I never went to Europe to fight the war itself, you know.
But you did a lot. What did you do for recreation when you were off duty over there?
Well, the camps had recreation buildings, tents or whatever they put up, and we were allowed to go into the towns, local towns, and go, because in England at that time, especially the small towns, usually the townspeople would meet in these little pubs in the evening, and they would discuss the day, what took place, and so forth and so forth. As a matter of fact, I met a young lady there one night, and we became very friendly, and maybe a little too friendly. And she invited me to her home, a little modest home, and I never forgot. I went to I had a good friend who was in charge of food supplies, and certain things you don't forget. And he gave me this large jar of fruit.
Of what? Fruit?
Fruit. And I brought that to this young lady's house because they invited me for dinner. And you have no idea how to appreciate that because they were just about starving. The English, because they import mostly stuff. And so we had that little relationship for a while. She expected a little bit more from me, as far as, I think she wanted to come to America. Mm-hmm. And I certainly was in no position to get married at the time. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. I just finished school.
Was she about the same age as you?
Yes. Very nice girl. I still remember her name.
What was her name?
Ann Johnson. Still remember her name. Very nice young lady. And she was very disappointed. But, I had to be practical. So when I came home, and I'm being shipped home, and I'm on board the Queen Elizabeth, which I've been converted into a troop ship, I had a lot to think about. I got home, I sent her a nice letter. She wasn't so happy to receive it. She expected more from me, but it just couldn't be. So that was the end of my career. Now, when I came home, I joined the American Legion, and I've been a member for 53 years, and I'm still a member.
Nice.
Very active in it. Not the last few years, because now I'm slow. I don't go out at night too much. Can't drive. And but I'm still active.
Great.
In whatever way I can, And I'm still a strong veteran.
It's wonderful.
Very strong veteran.
Well, we're very, very happy and appreciate your service.
I believe in the military. I believe we should support them. I think we should certainly honor them, even if it's just once a year. But I've had at parades. I've been most of the parades in Belmore, and I've had people come up to me and say, "Thank you for what you've done." So, which is very nice, for people to do that.
Well, we're very grateful that you decided to share with us.
And I'm a flag lover.
Good.
When I moved into the Greens where I am now, I wanted to see a flag at the main gate anyway. Mm-hmm. We didn't have it.
We have one in the corner right behind you.
We didn't have it at the time. And I fought for that. I went to the newspapers.
Great.
And I finally fought for it. But so we got that flag. So anyway, so as I say, I'm still a very dedicated veteran.
Now, when you came back, how did you adjust to civilian life?
Well, when I came back, I was confused. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I did decide. I did want to go to Pratt Institute because I did do a lot of artwork when I was in high school. I always did artwork. I always liked to sketch, paint them. And I wanted to get into Pratt Institute, which is a very prestigious arts and engineering school. And they were so overloaded with applicants because now we had the GI Bill of Rights available to all veterans. Pick yourself a school, you can go. And I couldn't get into Pratt at the time. And that was surprising because I had gone to Pratt while I was in high school. I used to go to Pratt on Saturdays, then I used to take courses in art. But even with that, I had to wait. So I got a little restless. A good friend of mine said, "Sal, you like to temper with art, don't you?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "I got a little job for you, if you want it. It's a little shop in Brooklyn. They're looking for someone to do hand painting. Would you want to try it?
Painting of what?
Well, they manufactured children's furniture and children's little items like clothes poles, little step stools, lampshades that were hand painted. There was a demand for hand painted items at that time. Later on, it became too expensive to buy anything that was hand painted. So they started using a lot of decals, decal. So I went down on this job, and I worked there a few years. And I sat there at this long table. I was the only artist there, and I did all the hand painting. Everything they manufactured, I did all freehand. I worked with lacquers, which were difficult to work with because they dry very quickly. You have to know what you're doing. You apply them. And I did that for about 5 years, and of course, in the interim, I met my wife, and we got engaged, we got married, and we started to have a family, and I decided that job was not my job. There was no future. I wasn't going anywhere on the job. I needed now to look ahead for a stable job, something where I can grow. So I got impatient, and I went to agency, okay? They sent me out to a job. They said, this may be something you may like. Well, it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to do more of the advertising, illustration, this kind of art, in studio art, work in the city. It was a company that manufactured printing equipment. And the name of the company was, at that time, very prestigious, Mergenthaler Linotype. Okay? You might have been familiar with that name, I don't know.
I am very familiar with that.
Unfortunately, I think they're out of business now because of things,
Technology's
the new
changed.
technology and computers and stuff like that. And I went down, I got interviewed, and I got hired right away, immediately, as a type designer. Now, it wasn't the sort of artwork I was looking for, but in some way it required designing talent because it was strictly type. We designed typefaces. We had enough typefaces like a public library. People don't realize that, all the different styles and so on. And so we designed type and logos and anything that went into print.
Nice.
Our department did that, okay? I stayed there 34 years. I worked my way up to, I worked in different locations they had, Hempstead, New York, where I was in Plainview. And I retired as a manager of the type department, okay? And I got a pension, and I still do, thank God. And so I guess I could have done better, but I liked what I was doing once I started to do it.
Wonderful.
And I liked what I was doing. And
have you kept in touch during those years with friends from the service?
Well, to be honest with you, there's only one that I know of now. He lives upstate. I think all the others have passed on, unfortunately, because my close friends when I was in Europe, they were older than me at the time. So I suspect that they're probably not here no more because I'm already going to be 90. Well, they may still be here, I don't know. But I have good memories. And as I said, I do a lot of reminiscing lately. I think back a lot.
It's wonderful you remember it all. How do you feel your wartime experiences affected your life?
That's a good question. Well, I still remain to be true American. I believe in traditional values, honesty, integrity. And we were taught these things in the Army, We were taught these things. So I think I came away better than when I went in the service. And I still try to maintain those traditional values and that sense of of trust, a sense of honesty, integrity, devotion to my family.
They're real life lessons that you learned.
Yeah. And I tell my wife very often, we've been blessed. I says, we live in a difficult age today. This is not my world, I said. But I said, we're fortunate because we have 4 wonderful children, 9 wonderful grandchildren who always call us and say, hi, Grandma and Grandpa, how you doing? And 7 great grandchildren. And I said, and they're all wonderful. Nobody's had serious problems. They're very, very devoted to their parents. They're good kids, I said. And as my oldest son said one day to my wife and I, we are what we are because of you and Mom.
Nice.
I said, not really. I thought we didn't do that much to make you what you are. Oh, yes, you did, Dad. Just by your actions, the few things you said occasionally, how you treated us, how you allowed us to be somewhat independent, lead our lives, make our own decisions. He says, and we love you for it. So I said, well, we love all of you too, I said.
That's wonderful. Do they live all on Long Island?
Unfortunately, 3 of them live out in the island.
Great.
One lives in Hoppock, and he worked for South Oaks for about 25 years. He retired 2 years ago. Now he teaches nursing in Hunter College in the city. My other son is a Suffolk County policeman. My youngest son works for Diebold, which they service computers, ATMs, things of that nature. And my daughter lives in Queens. So we're
Not too
fortunate
far.
we're all close.
That's wonderful.
And because of that closeness, we see them quite often.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
What have you spoken with your grandchildren and great grandchildren about your experiences at all during the war?
They love to hear it.
Yeah.
I tell them how life used to be back in the 30s when I was a boy. When the Depression came, I said, and we had to move into a cold, flat apartment. I said, and the toilet was in the hall. We didn't have a toilet in the apartment. So I said, if you had a problem, you had to wait for the tenant next door to get out of the toilet because you couldn't get in.
Wow.
I said, it was a cold, flat apartment. We had no central heat. We had a black stove in the kitchen that not only cooked, but it heated the rest of the rooms.
Wow.
But I says, we all managed.
Let me ask you, what message would you leave for future generations who might watch or hear this interview? What message would you like to leave them with?
Well, I think they should be loyal to their parents, and that's too often today. Respectful, be good citizens, say what you mean, don't change your mind because of politics or whatever else. Stick to your values. Very important, because those values are going to take you through life, and you'll be better for it. Someday you'll sit back and you'll think about it. And so your children and your grandchildren will be the same. And that's what I would say to you.
That's great.
Stick to your values. Be who you are. Don't try to be somebody else. If you say something, mean it. And you stand by it, whether it's going to help you or it's going to hurt you eventually. But you stick to what you believe and what your values are. And if you get through life, you do that, you'll always get through life without any problems.
That's great advice.
Okay.
That's great. Is there anything we haven't discussed? I haven't asked you if you were injured at all during the war.
No, I wasn't. No, I unfortunately avoided that. But
was there
no.
anything you did that you regretted during your service?
Not really.
No.
Not really.
Or
I went there. I wasn't bitter. I knew that we had to be there. It was a time that if the United States didn't enter the war, we wouldn't be the country we are today, probably. And I think that to close the conversation, that the reason we won the war because Hitler became so ambitious that he was foolish enough to attack Russia on the eastern coast when he knew that the Allies were going to invade on the west. He knew that was coming. You know, he knew it was going to happen, and yet he attacked Russia. And that was his downfall, which was good, because he could not handle everything. He was too far extended. Remember, he had occupied almost all of Europe and northern Africa. And that's quite now he wanted Russia. And Russia outnumbered him. That's the problem. And he knew that the Allies were coming. And that's what really ended the war. And of course, we had to deal with the Japanese, you know, and that's what brought us into the war, actually, because they attacked Pearl Harbor.
Right.
And we had no choice at that time. And of course, Franklin Roosevelt was eager to have us join the English in World War II, but he knew that America did not want to go to war, but now they had no choice.
Were you afraid, or did you have feelings of...
No, you know, because when you're at that age, you don't think about things like that. You know, in fact, they say, this is fun, you know. It's great, look at that now. You just don't realize the danger that you're putting yourself in.
Even when you were over there driving around England?
No, it didn't bother me.
Really? Wow.
No, I said, listen, whatever it be, it's going to be, it's going to be, you know. I can't, you know, when you're young, you think that way. Even today, young people, they don't worry about it. They get in a car, they go 80 miles an hour, let's have a little fun. They don't think of the danger and that they could kill not only themselves, but those in the car. But as you go older, you become a little more mature, and you think a little differently, you know.
Is there anything else we haven't discussed that you'd like to add about your experiences over there, or in training, or your feelings about war?
Well, I'm sad for what I see happening today, because I think that this is a big problem, what's going on, and it's just spreading throughout all those countries in Europe. And you know, we can't fight everybody's war, okay? We don't want them here, and we have to be sure that doesn't happen, but we can't fight everybody's war, okay? We should do what we can to assist, but they have to form their own coalition, because they're the ones that are there where this is really happening. And we can't be everywhere either. We can't, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Inasmuch as, so what's the right answer? I don't know. I think we have to take it on a day-to-day basis, see where we are, where we're going, and what's happening. But I think this is a conflict that's going to be with us for a while, unfortunately. And let's just hope that we're not touched, that they don't come here, although we have already one nut out west, cut the girl's head off. We don't want to see that happen. So I hope we'll be safe forever. I hope we'll always be safe. I hope we'll always be America, what we stand for, our values.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you so much for your service and for sharing.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It was an experience I had, I'll tell you. I wasn't looking forward to it, but in a sense, it was a nice experience. It matured me sooner than I expected.
Yeah.
And here's my picture here.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, can you
Thank you for inviting me.
You want to hold that up?
You can go through the whole thing.
Well, we're going to hold this up for now.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much, Sal.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.